Shalom, this is Daniel Stern of the Netivyah Bible Instruction Ministry, and today we're going to talk about the hostages and Gaza and Donald Trump. It is the biggest news story in the area right now, and we just have to address all these things. So, for those of you who saw, 3 hostages were released on Saturday, and they looked completely terrible. They were underfed. They were chained underground with no sunlight for a very, very, very long time. They were sick. They were sickly. They were just in terrible shape. They looked awful. And of course, this is inhuman treatment. Those who try to make a comparison between Israel and the Hamas always make this comparison. For example, with the International Criminal Justice Court of Justice, which did arrest warrants also for leaders of the Hamas and also for the Prime Minister and Defense Minister of Israel. But the comparison, of course, is untrue and is part of the anti-Semite propaganda against Israel, because there can't be a comparison. The Hamas terrorists who murdered women and children in their houses, in their sleep, in their cribs, who did unspeakable things, receive humane treatment, nutrition, lawyers, and everything else, completely legal system, are not tortured despite a false propaganda video that came out a few months ago that has been proven false. And unlike them, innocent civilians who were taken from their beds, from their homes, from their cribs, elderly, 80 plus, babies, 1 year old, are being tortured, who are not seeing any lawyers or Red Cross, are not receiving any medication. It is a completely asymmetrical comparison, and anyone with half a brain and a little bit of honesty knows that. So, obviously the response divides into two. There's one that says this is terrible, we have to destroy the Hamas, and the other that says this is terrible, we have to get the hostages home immediately. And once again, it goes into the division within Israel between the right and the left. The left, the progressive liberal left, only wants to get rid of the current administration. They hate Bibi with a passion, and all they want is to get rid of him by any means necessary, and will use any opportunity as a reason to protest against Bibi, whether it's judicial reforms or the hostages not being released, even though that of course is all on the Hamas, or the October 7th, which once again is on a combination of the Hamas and the not very successful military and intelligence apparatus that brought this upon us, and by themselves, the liberal progressive left that has been aiming for this Oslo Accord 2-state solution for the last 30 years and beyond, and don't understand that our enemies do not want peace and do not want to live next to us, but want to destroy us, and between the right that also wants the hostages to come home, but believe that the best way to do that is military pressure on the Hamas. Moving on. Donald Trump, who has been wildly signing decrees and making statements, and all of them are, I personally feel, or maybe not all, I don't want to generalize, but the majority of them seem to be very much in the right direction when it comes to bringing sanity to the world and bringing back morals and bringing the United States back to the position of power that allowed it to be the world police in such a way to bring good things to the world. Again, obviously, there's some, parts where the United States is possibly invading countries for oil and possibly trying to push democracy in places where they shouldn't be, and so on and so forth. But nothing's perfect. We live in a world full of sin. But overall, the morals of the generation of World War II, the generation before and after the United States, from when it was founded in 1776 and onward, are godly, Judeo-Christian morals, and I, for one, prefer that a Judeo-Christian moral country be the world's top superpower than a dictatorship like China or Russia or, God forbid, Iran, which thankfully is not in the position to be the world superpower. But anyways, Donald Trump said that the way the hostages looked is terrible, and that it is trying his patience in regards to the Hamas. To me, that is an indication that he is hinting to Israel that they will be permitted, quote unquote, to not move on to the second stage of this truce. The second stage, the 14th article of the first stage, states that the guarantor nations, Turkey, Egypt, Qatar, and the US, will make an effort to proceed to the second stage instead of the previous version, which said we'll guarantee to proceed to the second stage. That 14th article was an important change because it allows Israel to indeed go back to fighting the Hamas and doing what needs to be done at the end of this first stage. Not only that, but I believe that Donald Trump will look favorably and remember that Israel, despite the risks of stopping the hostilities, of releasing these terrorists and murderers who should be in prison for their entire sentence and longer, despite those risks, they went towards this treaty in order to give Donald Trump what he wanted, this treaty before his inauguration. And I believe he'll remember that favorably and allow Israel to finally do what it needs to do with the support of the United States, which it did not have during Biden's administration. We were held back. We had to be careful of the quote-unquote non-involved, which hardly exists there. We had to give them humanitarian supplies, which 90% of went to the Hamas, to either fund them or to continue their war efforts with the actual supplies themselves, the oil, gasoline, and so on. We had to not use as much force, not use as much bombs, had to be extra careful and keep moving around, and in fact were refrained from going to capture Rafiah in the Philadelphia corridor for many, many, many months, allowing supplies to keep flowing in freely from Egypt, which smuggles in supplies and receives a fortune for doing it, which is of course why Egypt wants to get the Philadelphia corridor back under their control, because, no offense, but Egypt is not our friend, it is our enemy. It's been loading up the Sinai with its Egyptian forces and has recently been making remarks about Donald Trump's plan and Israel not continuing the truce, that it will break the Camp David Accords, the peace between Israel and Egypt, if we do not continue the truce. And frankly, that is a little bit worrying, but I can explain another time why I'm not too worried about that. And, well, I'll explain this time. Basically, in this day and age, every country that wants to go to war needs to be able to have a supply of arms and ammunition. We saw in Israel that during the 15 months, we had what's known as ammunition economy. We had to consider thoroughly what to attack and how to attack. And similarly, Egypt, if it were to ever go to war against Israel, it would have an ammunition problem because its supplier is mostly the United States. And I don't expect that in such a war, it would continue to be supplied. So I don't expect that to happen, but it is certainly pressure. Obviously, as I mentioned last video, Donald Trump's whole idea, like Egypt potential war threats being pressure, Donald Trump's whole idea could also be just a negotiating tactic to pressure countries in the Middle East, to put pressure on the Hamas, to be willing to concede more in negotiations, and so on. But going back to Donald Trump's idea of removing the Gazan residents. I mentioned before why it's a realistic option, why it's a good option. I did not mention one thing that I find very hypocritical. Many countries around the world, and many of the left and the woke and the progressive and the liberals in Israel and around the world are against it, saying how terrible it is. But for the last 20 years, they've been saying that Gaza is an open-air prison and the people in there can't leave and are prisoners and are under siege and so on and so forth. You would think that if Gaza is an open-air prison, they would be the first to encourage allowing them out of the prison and to go elsewhere. So it's very hypocritical that they're against this idea. Now, how would it practically happen if it happens? Well, assuming that Egypt continues to object to it, which I'm not sure that objection will continue. Bear in mind that no country can openly say they'll accept Palestinians or they're in favor of the idea unless they're a conservative country that doesn't care what the world thinks, like Viktor Orban in Hungary. But all the rest of the countries have to either shut up about it or say they're against it, because if not, they'll be attacked thoroughly by everyone around them. Attacked, I mean verbally, not physically. Anywho, already, since the war started, hundreds and thousands of Gazans have been taken in convoys from the Kerem Shalom border crossing to the Ramon airport and flown to undisclosed countries for medical treatment. So that is one of the methods that could be used. Another one could be, of course, by boat. And another one is by convoys that drive people to the Jordan and other places, again, assuming Jordan would allow them to. Now, if one were to talk about international law, then of course it's lawful for every country to accept them because these are refugees fleeing a war zone. So it is legal for every country to accept them. And I would expect that the countries that have been so thoroughly opposed to Israel's operation of the last 15 months, such as South Africa and Spain and Ireland, would be the first to step up and take these poor Gazan refugees. But anyways, we'll wait and see. That's all I have for you for now. It was quite loaded. You probably have to watch this at a slower speed because of my constant chatter. But if you like this, please share it with someone who you think this would be important information to get to them. And as always, if you have any comments or corrections, put them in the comments below. I'll do my best to respond. And God bless you all. Shalom.